Welcome to Formation. Today we'll be speaking with someone who found a church to attend by looking in the parking lot. Join us. Welcome to Formation. My name is Shannon Moore. This is our weekly podcast from University Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas, where each week I sit down and just talk to somebody about their faith journey and their spiritual practices, and who knows what else might come up. So today I'm excited to have my friend and colleague, Reverend Kera Watts.
Yes.
So Kera.
Yes.
Does this space feel familiar?
It feels vaguely
to you?
familiar, but
Yeah, because Formation used to be
yes,
the three of us,
it was,
you and me and Renee Hoke.
right, and we had Bibles and
We had,
books
and all, and
conversation.
then Renee retired.
Renee retired. I went on
You went
sabbatical.
on sabbatical, and I took over.
And you took over. And you have staged a full takeover, and I'm good with it. I think this is great.
Do you feel like Barbara Walters has returned to the View? Is it kind of that sort of feeling?
No.
No.
It feels all new.
All new and fresh.
And fresh. It feels like
Okay.
a new season, and they got rid of all the old folks that were once here, and we're going in a new direction. That's what it feels like, which is good.
I'm really glad that you're here today. And, we met when I came on staff about a little over 7 years ago,
Yes.
something like that, and found out that we have quite a bit in common as far as our religious backgrounds. And so I almost always begin this thing by asking people, tell us about your childhood faith.
Yeah.
So you grew up in?
I grew up in Abilene, Texas.
Or as my series says, Ability.
Ability. And yeah, West Texas, not too far from here. It feels, just a couple hours away, but very different.
Yeah.
I grew up at First Baptist Church in Abilene.
Which was a big
church, a very big church, and we went to church all the time.
Sunday morning. Sunday nights.
But
Wednesday
we
night?
would have choir often before church on Sunday night.
Choir before church.
Sometimes choir before church, or high school choir before church.
Okay.
Wednesday nights for the prayer meeting, but there are also some youth
activities.
and kid activities. But mainly what I remember is my mom was always in the adult choir, and my dad they both taught youth Sunday school. And so on those Wednesday nights we would meet, we'd have dinner there.
Would you get off the bus at church or walk?
No, we'd go home.
Okay.
And then we'd meet my dad usually at church, and have dinner together there and with friends. And
they would cook a meal?
yes,
Okay.
they had a full meal. And you had choices. You had the line that you could go through, or you could get the square hamburger from McEatlin's and pink cookie. It was just great. That's where I learned to enjoy unsweet iced tea. So many meals.
Unsweet iced tea?
Unsweet, yeah, I don't know why. I thought that sounded very grown up, so I learned how to appreciate unsweet iced tea.
Okay, well, we'll agree to disagree on that.
And then eventually, once we had done our programming, my mom would still be in choir, my dad would still be doing kind of Sunday school teacher preparation and figuring all that out. And we would get to go to the Family Life Center. And the Family Life Center was
It was the place to be,
It was the
right?
place to be. It had, a huge gym and ping pong and video games and a bowling alley and a skating rink and, yes, all those things. And we used to get to go and we'd get to play racquetball, just all sorts of cool stuff.
So, okay, that does sound super cool.
Yeah, it was great.
So I'm curious if, I would imagine as a child and as a middle schooler, that would be really attractive.
Yes.
Did that attraction remain as you got into high school?
I don't remember. At some point, like in most
Even
families,
with all the cool stuff?
With all the cool stuff. And we didn't get to do all the cool stuff on Wednesday nights. It was mainly, that's why I could play ping pong, and I'm really good at Centipede, the video game.
Good to know.
Good to know. But eventually, I think just we got busy. And so probably once I could start to drive, that slowly started to fall away. But until then, we were there.
It seems to give parents a good thing to say, well, why would you want to go bowling when we have a bowling alley at church? Or skating.
True. And, I don't remember I remember having birthday parties there, skating birthday parties and stuff, but and I don't even know that those two things still function there. Through the process of ministry, and I'm not sure the order in which all of that happened, but First Baptist did some pretty remarkable outreach. There was the Big A Club, which served kids from all over, and that was stuff that kind of happened that I wasn't old enough to really participate in, and then I had moved on, and so they continue to do some really amazing ministry there.
What do you remember most about worship itself, how it affected you, what you liked or didn't? We'll start there. I have another question too,
Okay.
but let's start there.
I often, my mom's parents, eventually, when I was in early elementary, moved to Abilene, and so I would sit with my grandparents, and my grandfather was a former Baptist music minister, and just had this incredible voice, and my grandmother also had a very high soprano voice, and we would sit over on the side of the sanctuary, and they would sing so loudly that everyone would turn and look.
Did that embarrass you, or did you love it?
Both. It depended on how my grandmother was singing. Sometimes it was really extra high, but I remember standing between them, and that was my favorite part. Was just the music and the harmonies, and I loved that part.
Yeah.
I was never a fan of a sermon.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing to say.
Not really. I was the same way. I loved the hymns,
Yes.
and then the sermon would start,
Yes.
and it was just,
Yes.
I wanted to sing another hymn.
Yes, those were the active parts were the
Yeah.
things that I, as a child.
I think that's normal for
right.
a child.
And even sometimes, those are the parts of worship where we're active in doing that I connect with the most.
So how did your church experience translate to your faith life at home?
It just was all one and the same. I would say that I would not draw a distinction, but it was all, this is our family, and this is what we do.
Right.
And there was I didn't question that. I think I appreciated that. There was no, are we going to go to church this week?
Right.
That's just not a question. That was not a question that we would ask, or even know to ask, because that's just.
It's are we going to have dinner today?
Right.
You just you are.
It was that important.
Ingrained and important.
And the people that were there, I can remember sitting in the sanctuary and being able to name everyone in the choir. And I knew something about people in the choir. And I knew, I could sit around, I could look around. And so it wasn't just showing up. It was being a part of a community that I knew, and they knew me. They knew my parents and my brother. And it was just this all-encompassing part of who I was.
I knew everybody in our choir, too. All 12.
Yeah, but we had I knew a lot more people, but I just think that's a really unique.
That's great
thing, and I wouldn't have. Now I know about Sticky Faith and all of these things. I didn't have any clue about that, but all of those folks were engaged somehow.
And you felt that they cared for you.
Yeah.
And yes, that's really
that they knew me.
Right.
And I don't know how or why. But I just felt that, and that was a really big place, and yet, and probably because we were there all the time. We talk about that sometimes. That's when you're there, you get to know people, and when you're not, it's harder.
Right.
So
when you're there all the time, it's just like any other practice.
Right.
Of a skill or activity that the more you do it, the more engaged you are.
Right.
It just becomes part of who you are.
Exactly.
So then what happened as you graduated high school or college?
I went off to college and was in a smaller town. I was in Canyon, West Texas A&M, and I was playing tennis, and so that took a lot of time. to do college and play and do all of that. And the churches I would visit with my friends on occasion, because then it was a question.
You learned how to ask that question.
Then it was like, is anybody going to church? Because apparently we don't really have to. I didn't realize this. And so, but
part of that exploration
part
time.
of that figuring stuff out. But I can remember trying lots of different churches, and because my connection was so strong with my church growing up, it just felt different. It felt like a church, and I learned that what I had was really unique and really special, and how do you find that, and what parts of that were important. And so it really wasn't until I was through grad school and was married that found a church and was able to engage in it in ways, and that was in Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, where we found a smaller church, but it was an American Baptist church, and but felt similar connections,
right,
and recognized, that you show up and you volunteer and you are present.
So all of that stuff you learned and saw your parents do,
right,
was still there.
Right. I was teaching Sunday school to like kindergarten through second grade.
Okay.
I didn't have children. It's just they needed somebody to teach, and I enjoyed doing that. And so that's when I started volunteering and finding kind of a passion for doing. That was a way to do. And so that's how I kind of started.
Okay. Sounds like the beginning of a ministerial call, maybe?
I don't know that I had a clue at that point. Certainly the call that we talk about our calls, that I felt when I was a child at First Baptist, where a really boring interim minister had been preaching, and he stood up one day and he literally said, the Lord has spoken to me, and he said to put it in my pocket. And he took his sermon and he folded it up and he put it in his pocket, and he started to just talk, and he just spoke, and he had this sermon that was just, I connected with, and I don't remember what he said, but it was in that moment that a call, a voice, I don't know, but it was,
wow,
you can do that. You can do that too.
That is an incredible story.
But I never, I remember thinking, do what?
Right.
What can I do? I never saw a woman preaching. I never saw, and so my concern was always to go into ministry meant having to do things that I probably wasn't comfortable with in terms of a theology of saving people. Because although I was at a Baptist church that asked a lot of incredible questions and allowed space for questions about faith and doubt and all of that, it still was a place of, making sure everybody went to heaven.
And there's a moment of salvation.
And there's a moment of salvation. And if you
can
don't
say
have
the date,
that,
yeah.
if you don't have that, it's just kind of you're out of luck. And I could never understand the God.
Even being raised in
that being known and created by a God that loved me so much, that there could be people in the world that God was like, well, sorry we didn't get around to you. And that, I didn't, that's not something I couldn't understand how to be in ministry and make sense of that. And so it really wasn't until much later that I found places and people and ways of understanding theology where I could say, oh.
Well, I understood it and lived into it. and then later it changed. We're going to take a real short break and come back and continue this conversation. The members of University Christian Church have a message for you. You are valuable, worthy of love, and already part of what God is doing in the world. We invite you to join us Sunday mornings for worship. Traditional worship in our sanctuary at 9 and 11, simple worship in the chapel at 9:30, or visit our 10:10 service in Walker Hall. We are a church of open-minded people who value curiosity and recognize we don't have all the answers. We strive to be open and honest about where we are on our faith journey, and we practice compassion and generosity. All are welcome at University Christian Church, where you can experience Christ's courageous love for yourself and learn to carry that love with you wherever you go. Discover more about our programs and upcoming events at universitychristian.org and stay connected by following us on social media. We are back continuing this conversation with Reverend Kera Watts. And so, Kera, we were talking about before the break how we both came from this tradition of you can say the date that you got saved. You know, I was saved on this date, I was baptized on this date, and how important that was for the idea of salvation, of getting to heaven. Right. And you said that you always, even having grown up in it, sort of struggled with that idea. So once you were grown, married, working on your postgraduate degree in Kansas, you're at this new church where you're serving. Was that church, did it have a different philosophy or theology?
It did. It was, for whatever reason, it's the first time I heard talk about justice. Now, I know that I grew up in a place that considered justice important, but it's not something that we talked about service, but not ideas of justice and how, as Christians, we are called to figure out what that looks like. And I can even remember asking at some point, is this kind of like a new theme in religion? Or they're like, no, this has been around for a long time. And I was like, okay. So it really was. And
so it was eye-opening.
It was very eye-opening. It was just a really unique and different look. It was still a Baptist church, so that felt safe. And yet it was progressive in thinking kind of outside those lines of kind of salvation being the end-all, be-all thing. There's so much more.
How encompassing God's love is.
Right.
So is this about the time you became a mother?
It is, yeah.
And how did that change or affect your faith? Or did it?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think there is certainly a sense of, as you're, when you're holding this new child that you have been gifted with, and the beauty of that, and the unknowns of that, and just my hope was and continues to be that they would know that they were loved. I didn't want this precious, small, tiny child to think that they were doomed, or, I wanted them to know God's love. I wanted them to know that they were created by a God that loved them completely and totally. And so I think that continues to be something I try to remind my children of now, and to... Except
when they make you mad.
That never happens. No.
Well, tell me how you ended up in Fort Worth.
I was married, and my husband at the time was a graduate of TCU. And so I went to North Texas, and when we were dating, Fort Worth was just kind of where we would hang out. It was just such a great place, and had family in both Amarillo and in Abilene, and so Fort Worth was kind of a small city but a big city, and was just a place we always wanted to get back to. And so we spent time in Kansas, and then moved to North Carolina, where I was in Greensboro for a few years, and that's where our first child, Emery, was born. And then eventually we were expecting a second child, and there were business opportunities here, and it just felt like we wanted to be closer to family, that was a really important part of raising our kids.
And you kind of stumbled upon University Christian, right?
We did. The story, we had tried a lot of different Baptist churches, because the place that we connected most still was that place in Kansas. And we tried lots of different Baptist churches, and we were going to try one more before we joined, a church in town that probably would have been a good fit for us, but it just wasn't quite what we wanted. Wasn't quite what we wanted, and so we're trying one more church, and we had a 2-year-old and a baby, and we pulled into a parking lot, And we drove through it, and we said, there are no minivans. There are no Suburbans in this parking lot.
Yeah,
We're not going to do that.
Right.
So we came over near TCU, and we thought we would try a Baptist church nearby. And they had already started worship. And so we drove by UCC. Literally, this is how we ended up at UCC. We drove by UCC and saw that people were just starting to walk in. And my husband then said, I used to play basketball here when I was at TCU. Maybe we ought to try it. And we walked in, and it just was a fit. It was a fit for us.
And we have all those minivans that we just keep in the parking lot.
The minivans were everywhere.
Just
the
as an
Suburbans,
evangelism tool.
That
we just buy them and
right.
keep them in the parking lot.
Right, but also it was clear that the children's ministry was vibrant.
Yeah.
And and then we found out that there's a school, and then just there were so many things. The music, all the things.
And before long, you started working.
And then pretty soon, I had very high expectations for, there was a transition in the children's minister. Nita Gilger retired, and there was kind of a long period of time, and I'd already been busy volunteering and doing all that. And early on, I can remember thinking this would be what a cool opportunity this would be.
Yeah.
But whoever gets to say that and then end up doing
and then it happens.
Yeah, nobody gets to do that. And so I was busy leading a lot of the programs and things like that, and it worked out.
Yeah.
I ended up somebody mentioned my name, and I ended up interviewing, and it's been an incredible journey since then.
Well, and how long did your tenure in children's ministry last?
13 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that kernel of I could do this.
Yeah.
Not only came to pass in that way, but eventually you went to seminary and got ordained.
And was ordained
a few months ago.
Yeah, you just never know how all of that's going to play out. It's not a perfect line.
Right.
At all. And yet,
but
I feel like
I
can look back and see God's presence in all of those little parts that led me to this place.
And now that you're back from sabbatical, you're starting a new role in pastoral care.
Yeah.
And you have such great gifts for that.
Well,
I think you even have an award. Don't you have a pastoral care award from seminary?
I got a book award.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did.
See, somebody else knew already.
Right, but it really has been, I didn't plan all of this, and yet I have been incredibly blessed to end up where I am and getting to do the ministry that I get to do with the people I get to serve with, and the church and all of that.
Yeah, we're really fortunate.
Yeah, it's a remarkable place.
And I can say on a personal note how grateful I am for our friendship and just your steady presence. You're a person that we can always count on to be reasonable and patient and thoughtful, and so thank you for that. And I wish we had more time, but we're out of time.
I know, we didn't even laugh that much. What's going
on?
No,
we'll laugh later.
Okay.
But the cameras won't be on, so does it count?
No, that's usually what we just. There's a lot of laughter, which is great.
Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us. And if you would like to share your story on formation, I hope you'll contact me. The email address is formation@uccftw.com. I would love to hear from you. Take care and have a great week.